Hey there, Pitches. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Pitched, the first one of 2024. I am your host, Angie Trueblood, a podcast guesting and hosting expert and the founder of the Podwize Group, a concierge podcast interview booking agency. If you are an OG listener, hello, my friend. Happy New Year. And thank you for your support over all these years. If you are new here and just stumbled upon this episode, it is so great to meet you. Thank you for spending some of your time with me. So today's episode is a little different than most. It's the first one of a new year. And so I really wanted to be intentional with the message. Well, that sounds like I'm a preacher. With the content that I'm sharing. It's not actually a deep dive into someone else's story. It is my sharing a pretty personal experience that my family and I went through in December. You might be asking, girl, why you can start the year off with what might be a Debbie Downer of a story? Well, first off, there's a happy ending. So just know that as I share all the parts of it. But the reason I wanted to share it is because I view the word pitch pretty differently than most people. While many people in business view pitching as selling or convincing, I have always viewed it a bit more simply. To me, pitching is sharing an idea, asking for something to happen, or even advocating for your own voice to be heard. And as we go into this new year, I want you to walk into it with a very firm commitment to share your ideas, to ask for what you want, and to advocate for your voice to be heard in all areas of life, not just business. So what did I pitch for? Candidly, it was medical care for my daughter. If you follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook, you might know that my daughter rides horses. Yes, it's a super safe sport. She rides English. So if you're a horse person, you'll know what that means. And specifically, she competes in jumper shows. So that means jumper is where they are literally jumping poles. They are jumping gates. So yes, as she grows and advances, my mama heart is on edge all the time. So she rides horses, and not only is horseback riding dangerous inherently because you're on 1,000-pound plus beast, she also has no fear. So she loves riding horses that are a challenge. And back in November, we had officially decided to lease this horse that she had been riding for several months. Yes, you can lease or rent a horse like you can lease or rent a car. Laugh, pause, laugh, get that out if you're unfamiliar with it. But we decided to lease the horse that she'd been riding so that she had like a 1 year with this horse. And at the end of it, there would be the option that we could buy him if we chose to. Now, the horse that she rides is not what they like to call like a push button horse to where I could get on him and ride him. He is a little green or young, and his primary mode of communication sometimes is bucking, which is fine. She has learned to ride a buck. That is a whole different story, but she loves riding him. They've created this amazing bond, and they are beautiful together. So we went into November very excited at what might be coming of her with this horse. So she had a lesson a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually the same week that my husband had COVID. Also, fun fact, my son had a broken wrist from playing football in the neighborhood. So the Trueblood house was a hot mess already. I was running carpool for my son because my husband couldn't because he had COVID, and my daughter was at her lesson. And I got a phone call from one of the other moms that she had a pretty bad fall. She fell off the horse, and I needed to come get her. So I actually ended up meeting the mom halfway between our house and the barn. And then I took her to like a standalone emergency room that we have locally. it was pretty clear that her collarbone was broken and she had a little laceration on her face that pretty evidently would need stitches. So I want to pause here for a second and let you know the role that I have traditionally played in my family. I think you might know already, but I spent 10 years in pharmaceutical sales. And so a lot of my family members think I'm a doctor. Not really, but they do reach out to me with a lot of not medical questions, but if there's doctors involved or hospitals, I tend to be the one that, I don't even know if they invite me, but I tend to take over because I don't really get intimidated by the medical profession because I had worked with them for 10 years. And so advocating in that space comes very naturally to me. Just know that going into this conversation. So I took my daughter to this little emergency room, and they admitted us. They were so kind, so sweet to her. And I started texting a couple of my friends. One of them was a nurse practitioner at an office that I actually had called on years ago. And I'm like, do you know any plastic surgeons? Because I started to think, this is a cut on her cheek. She's a 13-year-old girl. I want to make sure that they get stitched. It's not like it's a stitch on her knee, right? So I wanted to make sure that she got really good stitches to sort of minimize scars moving forward. So feedback from the group texting was that, yeah, it would be ideal for her to have a plastic surgeon to do those. So that was really the first point at which I had to kind of advocate and step up and say, hey, this is really what I would want. And I had to position it in a way to where it was no downside of the ER doctor. It's just that was something that I really thought we should have a specialist take a look at. And so I talked to the doctor, I talked to the nurse about it. And basically to have made that happen, we would need to be transferred to another hospital. And I was prepared to do that. They needed to get the results back from a lot of the tests they were running. They were looking for concussion. They wanted to make sure there was no actual internal damage on her face. So they did some CT scans and then an X-ray. And interestingly enough, the doctor on call actually opted to transfer us because there was a little bit of indication that there might be some impact to the nerve on her face. And the doctor just wanted to be cautious and have a plastic surgeon be the one to investigate that a little bit more and to stitch her up. So that advocating, that pitching, if we want to call it that, was one that I didn't have to do too much, right? There wasn't a lot. I didn't have to, if you think about how we pitch podcasts, I didn't really have to follow up much because the doctor made that call for us. So then the conversation turned to transferring us to the children's hospital, which was the place that I really wanted to be. I probably should have taken her in the first point, but I just didn't know. I was panicked. So then they started all of the paperwork and hullabaloo for transferring us to the children's hospital, apparently by an ambulance, which seemed like, what is that saying? Like bringing a gun? No, the opposite of bringing a knife to a gunfight. I don't know what that is, but it seemed like a little overkill. So we're sitting there and we're waiting and it was taking forever. So I came out and I asked hey, how long is this going to take? And they said they told me where the ambulance currently was and that they had another transfer before her. And this was getting late at this point. I mean, good Lord, it was probably 9 p.m. and the accident had happened a little bit after 4. So I said, can I just take her? Would it be okay if I took her to this other hospital? And the nurse was like, no, we don't think so because of the open wound. And if, she's got the broken collarbone. And I said, okay. So I thought about it. And then I passed the doctor in the hallway and I asked her, and I said, would it be okay if we were the ones to transfer her? We don't need an ambulance. I know how to get to this hospital. And she said, I mean, you're an adult, so you can do what you want. And I loved her response. It was just so real and human, which I appreciated. It kind of snapped me out of the panic a little bit. And so that's what we ended up deciding to do. So for me, I had to mull over in my head, do I want to transfer her? And will they let me? Right. And I think that's a lot of times in business and life where we get paralyzed and we think like, is that even allowed? Like, these are the people in charge. They are the ones moving this process along. I don't feel comfortable raising my hand and asking to kind of buck the system. And it was something that I felt needed to happen. And I think because I had my daughter there, it was motivating enough because I was trying to take care of her. Now, fun fact, I was in such like a panic. I ended up having my best friend take us. Remember, husband was home with COVID. So my best friend actually came and drove us to the hospital because I started panicking. And I think the shock of the whole situation started taking over. So that was really the first time that I had to like stand up and advocate and do something, that was outside of the norm. And so while I know telling this story might seem like, girl, this is a little different than what we do in business, I think standing up and doing that thing that might make you a little nervous, asking that host, right, if you can be a guest on their show when they seem to be in a bit more of a position of power, it's the same confidence. And even if you don't have the confidence, it's the same putting one foot in front of the other that it takes to make those things happen. So again, this is my love letter to you going into the new year. Put that foot forward, even if you're not sure, right? Ask the questions. And then when we ended up getting to the children's hospital, which was an amazing facility, there were other times that I did have to step up and advocate. They seemed to be very focused on the cut on her face, which I appreciated. But I know I asked probably 7 different people, like, hey, can we get ortho to take a look at the collarbone? Like, we knew it was broken. It just seemed, for any of you that have had a collarbone break, really, as long as it's not displaced, you kind of throw a sling on it and it'll heal on its own. But I just felt no one at that hospital had yet looked at it. Everyone was focused on her face and the plastics and all of that. So I had to do that a number of times to get ortho to come in. And what was actually reassuring to me was I heard the ortho doctor tell the medical student who was kind of working the floor that we were on, he was like, hey man, sorry to give you a hard time earlier, but waiting this long for us to come in is not right. And so I felt very relieved that the doctor also thought the length of time that it took for him to see her was far outside the realm of what's acceptable. So I felt like, okay, I might be pestering them, but it was totally worth it. And I think this comes into play sometimes with the follow-up, right? Whether it's you're pitching to be a guest on a podcast or any other opportunity, really. It could be following up with a potential client, right? We're always thinking, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be annoying. But if I had a nickel for every client that we've worked with in more of our consulting package to where we create what they need to go and pitch themselves, who on follow up with us, because we'll have calls after the fact to see how it's going and to troubleshoot. When I ask, how many follow-ups have you sent? The answer is almost always none. And so I think this piece is important too, going into the new year, to not only commit to sharing your idea, whatever it is, advocating for yourself, whatever it is, but following up until you get an answer. Now, with pitching podcasts, it's a little different because we don't want to follow up 10 times because that is pretty annoying. But having a follow-up system in place to where you can remove the emotion from it. And it's kind of what I did in the hospital. I just asked different people. Literally, every time someone came into her room that seemed to have some bit of power or sway, I asked, hey, any idea when ortho is going to come look at her? Because no one has. And it wasn't an emotional, why are you not doing your job? None of that. But it was a, hey, I'm popping back in to ask, is this going to happen? And that's really similar to the follow-up. So I want you, again, to walk into the new year committed to fully advocating for whatever it is that you want to happen. And that does include following up. So I know this is a bit of a departure from how we normally approach pitching, but I thought it might be impactful for you to see what that looks like in real life and how advocating for yourself doesn't have to end when you clock out at 5:00. It falls into all different areas of your life. There were so many more things throughout this day where I really had to put on kind of my big girl mama pants and advocate for care and advocate for information, whether it was realizing that the pediatric plastic surgeon was someone that I kind of knew. I just didn't know that that was her job, and reaching out to her and asking for information, to advocating for our discharge once we had gotten the okay from the primary doctor, really getting the balls rolling. No, not the balls rolling, the wheels turning to get our discharge and to keep hounding this poor, sweet nurse to make that happen so that we could actually get home. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it actually opens up to you why the work that I do and what my team and I do is so important to us, and why it means so much to me is because I want more people in this world stepping up, sharing their gifts, sharing their voice with the people that matter. So that's all I've got for you this week. I am really excited about the direction of the podcast in the new year. I am working with a new strategic partner to help us not only create really incredible audio, but to help with the strategy of where we're going with the show and how we are serving you. So this is also an episode to tell you to buckle up, get ready, get excited. If you have friends that you think would enjoy the show, then share it with them. Get them ready for the new year as well. I appreciate you, my friend, and I am really excited about the new year, and I hope you are too. All right. Again, if we have not connected on LinkedIn, you would have never known that my daughter rides horses. So I share things that are business related and also personal over on LinkedIn. So please connect with me. Angie Trueblood is where I am. You can find me there very easily. Send me a DM that says where you heard me, and let's be friends and let's rock 2024 together. Okay. Until next week, be well, be visible, and go get pitched. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitched. If you would love to get pitched to be a guest on podcasts, we here at the Podwize Group would love to help you. We offer 2 primary services to support our clients in landing and converting podcast interviews. Whether you want to handle the pitching yourself or you'd like our team to do it all, hop on over to our site, thepodwizegroup.com/services, to check out how we can help. If one of them suits your fancy, you can schedule a time to connect with me right there. I am so looking forward to connecting with you.